even on. Evan Sidery doesn't take sides. He just reports on what he's hearing of Forbes Sports. Evan, twice in 2 weeks? Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, Alan, thanks again. Anytime. And I wasn't expecting this kind of news to drop, but it certainly changes the whole dynamic as far as the Kings in the NBA.
So let's start here, Evan. Do you just very simple? We'll keep it simple for you to start. Do you actually think that Fox could get moved before the trade deadline? I mean, this is a franchise-altering move, and you got 8 days to pull it off? I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot of time, but I know crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I would have said no up until about this morning when I called around asking some agents and people within the NBA, getting some buzz around the league, so to say, about what the read is on the situation. And with everyone's pretty surprised, like, why would DeAaron Fox ask for a trade amidst probably their best stretch they've had at basketball in the last year or so? Like, they've been fantastic under interim head coach Doug Christie. I think it's surprising to a lot of people around the league, but I think it just kind of goes to show. I think DeAaron Fox might be doing the Kings a favor here instead of waiting until the summer when he's going to decline an extension anyways. Why not just let it be known behind the scenes with Rich Paul, hey, I'm not going to sign a long-term deal here. Go ahead and find that deal for me while you can to get maximum value. That's kind of the read that I'm getting on the situation, Alan, is that I would have said up until yesterday that I would be surprised if he's moved. But as of this morning, I'd be pretty surprised, to be quite honest, Alan, if he's not moved by the deadline.
I know you probably don't have a complete handle on how everything went down, Evan, but can you just take us through your thought process when it broke that Shams came out and said, hey, the Kings are open to having discussions? Was that weird to you? And, there's a lot of infighting out here in Sacramento about how that news got out, and a lot of people are blaming the front office, but I'm trying to wrap my head around why the front office would release something like that. And I don't think that makes very much sense. I mean, you want to move in silence, no?
Yeah, it is interesting to me. It kind of makes me think it's from Fox's camp, just because it's hard to say, though. I'm not 100% sure as far as an answer on that. But I would say I'd lean more towards Fox's side than the Kings side. But it would make some sense if you're playing devil's advocate for a moment, where if the Kings do want to let it be known, hey, let's get some calls out there right now and see how much teams are actually interested in DeAaron Fox. And Shams Charania did go on in SportsCenter this morning and mention that over a dozen teams have called about DeAaron Fox so far, at least inquiring, not about like an aggressive trade offer or anything, but at least over 10 teams have called about DeAaron Fox already, kind of gauging the price to the Kings, so to say, of what they'd be willing to pay, which is interesting to me because I think they'd be able to get an awful lot for DeAaron Fox, especially if they trade him now instead of in the summertime, because at that point he'd be on an expiring contract, and a lot of teams would probably be known at that point he might just be a rental. So if you can get at least 2 postseason runs from DeAaron Fox with him instead of just one, that ups your price a lot, in my opinion.
And that kind of answered my next question on why Rich Paul, it came out from Sam Amick. Rich Paul says, hey, it's better to move him now, even if it's not to the preferred destination, because it's easier to sell a rental for 2 playoff runs potentially than just for 1. Talking to Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports. From what you're hearing, Evan, is this thing salvageable, or should Kings fans start to put the Fox jerseys in the closet?
I hate to say this because a month ago, I was on the radio mentioning DeAaron Fox with Whitey Gleason, and we were talking about the same scenario when this reports first started coming out, talking about DeAaron Fox. And I said back then, I don't see any way they move him, but it's kind of coming out of left field, Alan, as far as this development late in the process, where I think Fox's camp has just said, hey, we decided we're going to move on here. Go ahead and get that trade in while you can. And I do think that's going to happen. I'd be pretty surprised if it doesn't happen at this point. There's a lot of momentum towards that deal happening. I think he wants San Antonio. I think San Antonio, Allen, is willing to pay that price too. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be multiple first-round picks, maybe a young guy or 2. But I think the Spurs know that a guy, DeAaron Fox, who wants to go play in a small market like San Antonio with Victor Wembanyama, that does not come along very often for a small market team to be prioritized like that. So it might not cost them a Stephon Castle or Devin Vassell, but it's probably going to cost them a couple first-round picks. But luckily with them, they are loaded with future draft capital because of the Hawks trade with DeJounte Murray. They have 2 future unprotected first-round picks from the Hawks still coming. They have a couple unprotected picks still coming from the Timberwolves, too, from that draft night trade. So they are set up really well to help the Kings here if they want to do a draft pick late in trade. I think that's probably what the Spurs are going to try to do here.
Talking to Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports. Evan, we were having some fun just joking about the Rich Paul Grim Reaper scenario when you have a superstar, a star in a small market. But do you see this as the normal Rich Paul playbook, or is this something different because of maybe missed opportunities with the Kings and how everything went down with DeAaron wanting to stay and essentially giving the Kings a choice? Hey, either, sell some of your future pieces to get us help or send me packing. Are you putting this in the normal clutch playbook, or are you putting it in a different category?
I hate to play both sides there on, but I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because we saw this exact same strategy play out with Rich Paul and Anthony Davis when he first wanted out of the New Orleans Pelicans way back when, around the deadline about 6-7 years ago, he wanted out, he requested the Lakers, and pretty quickly he got his way eventually in that scenario. And I think that's the same scenario we're seeing unfold here, where he wants a preferred destination. DeAaron Fox does. He wants the Spurs. I think eventually he will end up there. It just depends on the price the Spurs want to pay. But I do think here still, I think the front office of the Kings does deserve a lot of blame for this, because DeAaron Fox is a great player. I think he should have been surrounded by more defense-first kind of players. I think this roster has been really flawed as far as building it around Sabonis and Fox. Keegan Murray's a great wing defender. He's above average, I would say, in that category. Keon Ellis has really developed the last couple of years, Allen, but who else did they really hit on as far as draft picks, as far as young players over the years? And the one guy they recently did was Tyrese Halliburton. They traded him for Sabonis. That was a win-win trade, of course, for the Kings and the Pacers. But I think Monty McNair and the Kings front office have not done a great job of surrounding DeAaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis with the pieces they needed as offense-first players. And you're kind of seeing that on the court. They've been a really inconsistent team the last couple of years, and now they're paying the price for it.
Talking to Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports. Evan, is there a team besides the Spurs, Rockets, or Heat that you're hearing might get in the mix? I mean, we know 12 teams called, but, Shams didn't get into the 12 teams. I'm assuming those 3 teams were part of the action. I know the Rockets, there was a report that the Rockets want to see what they do, which could lead them to missing out on DeAaron, but they want to see what they do this postseason with Amen Thompson and the leap he's taken. But are there any other names that you're hearing checked in on DeAaron Fox today?
Yeah, actually, I can report one here, and I heard this late last night. Keep an eye on the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
That is one team to watch out for here. They have the draft pick flexibility, they have the cap space, they have the young prospects to make a really compelling offer, I think, to the Sacramento Kings for DeAaron Fox. And the question is, would Fox on a long-term extension there? But I think if you add Orlando, DeAaron Fox into the mix there with a healthy Paolo Banchero, a healthy Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, that is a legitimately terrifying quartet there that can make a lot of noise in the Eastern Conference. And Sacramento can make salaries work with Orlando by just sending out Jonathan Isaac or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, plus Cole Anthony. So they can really quickly get there as far as players and draft capital. They probably have to overwhelm the Kings with a lot of picks to make that work over a team like the Spurs, for example. But Orlando is definitely a team to watch out for as far as the other teams you mentioned. Orlando is definitely in that mix.
As far as the Spurs are concerned, and DeAaron, we know he has a connection to Texas and wants to play with Wemby, or seems like he wants to play with Wemby. Let's say that move happens tomorrow. Let's say it happens today. The Spurs are going to power through. Maybe they get into a play-in situation. Maybe they get really hot and lose in the first round of the playoffs. Is that off-season, just looking at their cap situation, is that just, hey, we have 2 stars, and all we have to do now is market these 2 stars, one being Victor Wembanyama, and now it's just a cap space conversation. And that team, what it looks like right now, because when we're looking at this as Kings fans, we're seeing, okay, so you're going to have to give us whatever to get De'Aaron Fox. And now you're going to go into next season with whoever it is you were able to hold on to. And look, I like Stephon Castle. I like Devin Vassell, but it's not like we're talking about the Rockets here. Would the Spurs model be more so we have De'Aaron Fox and now we have become a destination for whoever is left?
Yes, I think what's going to be really interesting here, Allen, is that the Spurs are not going to want to give up a guy like Devin Vassell or Stephon Castle, and it's going to be a real negotiation here. I think they'd probably definitely rather give up a Keldon Johnson, for example. They're a young athletic wing. He's averaging 12 points per game, making $19 million a year. They have Zach Collins' contract. He'd be an okay backup center with the Kings. Harrison Barnes can't come back here because he was just with the Kings last season, so that wouldn't work, but maybe he's potentially traded into a third team. I'd be pretty surprised, Alan, if the Spurs are willingly going to give up a guy like Vassell or Castle in a deal, maybe even a Jeremy Sohan, for example. It might end up being, let's say, a Keldon Johnson plus a Zach Collins and 3 or 4 first-round picks is what might their offer end up being. That doesn't sound really appealing if you're a Kings fan out there listening to that.
Probably no, it does not at all. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, so it would be a really big tug of war back and forth here. I think eventually the Spurs might cave and give up a Vassell, but I think Stephon Castle, at least from the indications I've heard so far, he seems pretty untouchable alongside Wembanyama. So it'd probably be a Devin Vassell-led package, maybe Keldon Johnson thrown in there as well. I would also keep an eye on Kevin Huerter being included in that deal too, Alan, because they've been shopping Kevin Huerter for months now. And ironically enough, Kevin Huerter and DeAaron Fox's salary is an identical salary match for Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson. So that's just something to monitor there.
It seems like every day somebody else is untouchable, Evan. Let me ask you this one before we let you go, and thanks so much for the time, as always. When you're telling us these things and the packages that you're kind of cooking up, help us out here, Evan. Give us a world where the Kings don't have to rebuild, because that Spurs package, that seems very rebuildy to me. Is there a world where the Kings can retool and you know, there are a lot of people, I'm sure you've seen it, hey, the Kings can actually be better if they pull this off in the immediate future? Is there a world where the Kings can retool and keep this thing rolling, or is that just Sacramento with purple lenses on?
Yeah, I would say it might be the latter there, just because unless you're banking on Devin Vassell to be an all-star level player, for example, or Keldon Johnson take a leap with Sacramento, there's really not many teams that offer that player, so to say. It's going to keep you on that win-now timeline, which is what the Kings want to do, of course, and they still could. They could still be a good team if they trade DeAaron Fox away. One thing I did hear from an agent today I wanted to ask you, because it's an interesting concept I heard. The Suns maybe try to get involved here as far as Bradley Beal and trying to offload his contract. I'd be stunned if the Kings accepted a deal with Bradley Beal in it, but let's say hypothetically a Bradley Beal plus a Keldon Johnson plus 2 or 3 first-round picks from the Kings and from the Spurs and the Suns each. So that's about 4 or 5 first-round picks to take on Bradley Beal's contract. That was a concept I heard today. I'd be, again, pretty stunned if the Kings did that. But that's kind of the deal you're looking at there. Unless it's a non-Spurs deal, it's going to be probably a lot of draft picks you're going to get back in return.
Yeah, I mean, the dang Spurs, Evan. Well, look, I don't want to do it, but, you know, if he's out, he's out. Thank you so much, Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports. Go check out what Evan has cooking on ForbesSports.com. Also follow him on social media. Great stuff as always. Evan, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Alan.
We have seen this story before.